The moment an empath awakens, they stop being everyone's emotional shelter and become a force that nobody can manipulate. What if the kindness you've been giving away for years was never weakness, but untapped power? And what if the people who benefited from your silence are the very people who fear your awakening the most? Stay until the end, because what an awakened empath becomes is something most people never understand until it's too late. Most people think an empath's greatest weakness is how deeply they feel. They assume that because empaths experience emotions intensely, they must also be fragile. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if the very thing that caused an empath the most pain eventually becomes the source of their greatest strength? This is exactly what happens during the awakening process. Before awakening, an empath often walks through life carrying emotional weight that was never theirs to begin with. They absorb the stress of friends, the anger of family members, the disappointment of coworkers, and the negativity of strangers. They enter a room and immediately sense tension. They notice changes in people's energy before anyone says a word. Because they care so deeply, they often feel responsible for helping everyone around them feel better. The problem is that this constant emotional absorption slowly drains them. They begin sacrificing their own peace to maintain harmony for others. They become experts at understanding everyone except themselves. For years, many empaths live in survival mode without realizing it. They replay conversations in their minds. They wonder if they offended someone. They blame themselves for problems they didn't create. They stay awake at night thinking about situations that other people forgot days ago. Every criticism feels personal. Every rejection feels devastating. Every conflict feels like a threat to their emotional well-being. Because they naturally see the good in people, they often ignore warning signs and continue giving chances to those who repeatedly hurt them. They tell themselves that if they are patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, things will eventually change. Yet instead of finding peace, they find exhaustion. Then something begins to shift. The awakened empath starts recognizing a powerful truth. Not every emotion they feel belongs to them. Not every problem requires their involvement. Not every wounded person deserves unlimited access to their energy. This realization changes everything. They stop automatically accepting responsibility for the emotional state of everyone around them. They begin asking an important question whenever stress enters their life. Is this actually mine to carry? For the first time, they separate compassion from obligation. They learn that caring about someone does not mean sacrificing themselves for that person. As this awareness grows, emotional resilience begins to develop. The awakened empath no longer reacts to every emotional wave that passes through their environment. They observe emotions instead of drowning in them. When someone becomes angry, they don't immediately assume they did something wrong. When someone criticizes them unfairly, they don't spend days questioning their worth. When someone attempts to manipulate them through guilt or emotional pressure, they recognize the tactic instead of falling victim to it. The same sensitivity that once made them vulnerable now becomes a source of wisdom. They can read emotional situations clearly because they are no longer trapped inside them. One of the most surprising changes is how calm they become during situations that once overwhelmed them. The awakened empath understands that emotional control does not mean suppressing feelings. It means refusing to let feelings dictate every decision. They still experience sadness, disappointment, frustration, and pain. The difference is that these emotions no longer control the direction of their lives. They feel deeply, but they recover faster. They care deeply, but they protect their peace. They remain compassionate without becoming consumed. People around them often notice this transformation before the empath does. The individuals who once relied on emotional manipulation suddenly discover that their old strategies no longer work. The guilt trips lose their power. The dramatic outbursts lose their influence. The emotional games become transparent. The awakened empath sees through patterns that once kept them trapped. Instead of reacting impulsively, they respond with clarity. Instead of seeking approval, they trust their judgment. Instead of constantly defending themselves, they remain centered in their truth. This new emotional strength can confuse those who benefited from the empath's old behavior. They may accuse the empath of changing, becoming distant, or acting differently. In reality, the empath has not become colder. They have become stronger. They have learned that protecting their emotional well-being is not selfish. They have discovered that inner peace is too valuable to hand over to people who do not respect it. They have realized that true strength is not found in carrying everyone's burdens, but in knowing which burdens belong to them and which do not. One of the most powerful moments in an empath's life is not when they learn to understand others better. It is when they finally learn to protect themselves. For years, many empaths believe that being kind means always saying yes. They believe that being loving means always being available. They believe that being compassionate means putting everyone else's needs ahead of their own. Because of this belief, they become the person everyone calls during a crisis, the person everyone depends on for support, and the person who never seems to ask for anything in return. At first, this feels meaningful. It feels like purpose. It feels like love. But over time, something begins to happen. The empath starts feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and emotionally drained. They give more and more of themselves while receiving less and less in return. What makes this situation even more difficult is that empaths often struggle with guilt. Every time they think about saying no, a voice inside their mind tells them they are being selfish. Every time they try to prioritize their own needs, they worry about disappointing someone. They fear conflict. They fear rejection. They fear being misunderstood. So they continue saying yes when they want to say no. They continue helping when they need rest. They continue sacrificing their own peace to maintain the comfort of others. The awakened empath eventually realizes a truth that changes everything. They understand that boundaries are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of self-respect. They begin to see that healthy relationships do not require endless sacrifice. Real love does not demand the destruction of personal well-being. Genuine connection does not require constant emotional exhaustion. This realization often arrives after years of painful experiences. It may come after being taken for granted. It may come after being manipulated. It may come after discovering that some people value what the empath provides more than they value the empath as a person. As awareness grows, the empath begins changing their behavior. For the first time, they start paying attention to how certain people make them feel. They notice who only contacts them when they need something. They notice who ignores their boundaries. They notice who becomes upset whenever they prioritize themselves. Suddenly, patterns that once seemed invisible become impossible to ignore. The awakened empath starts understanding that not everyone deserves unlimited access to their energy, time, and emotional resources. This is where true transformation begins. Instead of automatically saying yes, they pause before responding. Instead of immediately fixing everyone's problems, they ask whether the responsibility truly belongs to them. Instead of feeling guilty for protecting their peace, they recognize that their well-being matters too. This shift may appear small from the outside, but internally it feels revolutionary. Every healthy boundary becomes a declaration of self-worth. Every respectful no becomes evidence that they finally value themselves as much as they value others. What surprises many empaths is how people react when boundaries appear. Supportive and healthy individuals usually respect them without resistance. They understand that everyone has limits. They appreciate honesty and mutual respect. Toxic individuals, however, often react differently. They may become angry. They may attempt to create guilt. They may accuse the empath of changing or becoming selfish. This reaction reveals something important. The people who benefited most from the absence of boundaries are often the people who dislike them the most. The awakened empath learns not to be controlled by these reactions. They understand that another person's disappointment is not always proof that they have done something wrong. Sometimes disappointment simply means someone can no longer access them in the same way they once did. This realization strengthens the empath's confidence. They stop measuring their worth by how pleased everyone else feels. They stop believing that peace can only exist when everyone around them is happy. As boundaries become stronger, something remarkable happens. The empath experiences a level of freedom they may never have felt before. Their energy increases. Their relationships improve. Their stress decreases. They no longer spend every moment trying to manage the emotions of others. Instead, they focus on building a life that aligns with their values, goals, and emotional health. The awakened empath discovers that boundaries do not push away the right people. They reveal who truly respects them, who genuinely cares about them, and who was only interested in what they could take from them. One of the greatest struggles an empath faces is not understanding other people. It is being fully understood by themselves. For much of their life, an empath often becomes a mirror for everyone around them. They adapt to different environments, adjust their personality to fit different groups, and learn how to make others comfortable. They know how to avoid conflict. They know how to say the right thing at the right time. They know how to create harmony even when chaos surrounds them. On the surface, this ability appears admirable. It helps them build connections and maintain relationships. But beneath that skill often lies a hidden cost. The more they focus on becoming what others need, the further they drift away from who they truly are. Many empaths spend years seeking acceptance without realizing it. They become experts at reading a room and modifying themselves accordingly. Around one group of people, they may become quieter. Around another, they may hide certain opinions. In some situations, they suppress their ambitions to avoid making others uncomfortable. In others, they hide their emotions because they fear being judged. Little by little, they begin editing themselves. Not because they are dishonest people, but because they desperately want to belong. They want to be liked, understood, and appreciated. The problem is that when someone constantly changes themselves for acceptance, they eventually lose sight of their authentic identity. The awakening process forces the empath to confront a difficult truth. No matter how much they adjust themselves, there will always be people who misunderstand them. No matter how hard they work to please everyone, someone will still criticize them. No matter how carefully they manage other people's perceptions, they cannot control how others think. This realization can feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges a lifelong habit. But it also creates freedom. The empath begins to understand that authenticity is more valuable than approval. As this shift takes place, something remarkable happens. The awakened empath stops asking, "What do they want me to be?" and starts asking, "Who am I when nobody is influencing me?" This question becomes the beginning of a powerful transformation. They start reconnecting with their own values, beliefs, goals, and desires. They become curious about their genuine preferences instead of automatically adopting the expectations of others. They learn to trust their own voice, even when it differs from the opinions around them. For many empaths, speaking honestly is one of the first signs of authenticity. They stop agreeing with everything simply to avoid tension. They stop pretending to be comfortable with situations that make them uncomfortable. They stop suppressing important truths because they fear negative reactions. This does not mean they become rude or confrontational. Their empathy remains intact. The difference is that their kindness is no longer dependent on self-sacrifice. They learn that honesty and compassion can exist together. People often react strongly when an empath becomes authentic. Those who genuinely care about them tend to appreciate the change. They feel they are finally getting to know the real person behind the mask. But others may struggle with it. Some people become uncomfortable when the empath no longer behaves in predictable ways. They may accuse them of changing or becoming difficult. What they are actually experiencing is the loss of control they once had over the empath's behavior. The awakened empath understands this distinction and refuses to abandon authenticity simply to keep others comfortable. As confidence grows, the empath becomes less concerned with external validation. They no longer need constant approval to feel secure. They stop measuring their worth through the opinions of others. Instead, they evaluate themselves according to their own principles. This creates a deep sense of inner stability because their identity is no longer dependent on changing circumstances or fluctuating opinions. They know who they are, what they stand for, and what they refuse to tolerate. One of the most liberating aspects of authenticity is the ability to attract the right people. When someone spends years hiding parts of themselves, they often attract relationships based on an incomplete version of who they are. But when the awakened empath begins showing their true personality, something extraordinary happens. The wrong people naturally drift away, while the right people feel drawn closer. Genuine relationships become possible because they are built on truth rather than performance. The empath no longer wastes energy maintaining an image that was never real. Instead, they live openly, speak honestly, and move through life with a confidence that comes from complete alignment between who they are inside and who they allow the world to see. One of the most painful lessons an empath learns is that not everyone who enters their life deserves a permanent place in it. Before awakening, empaths often believe that every relationship can be saved if enough love, patience, understanding, and effort are invested. They see potential where others see problems. They see wounds where others see toxic behavior. They see possibilities where others see red flags. Because of their compassionate nature, they naturally want to help people grow, heal, and become better versions of themselves. While this quality is admirable, it can also become one of the greatest sources of emotional pain when it is not balanced with wisdom. Many empaths spend years giving people second chances, third chances, and sometimes even 10th chances. They excuse behavior that should never have been tolerated. They forgive betrayals that continue repeating. They stay in one-sided friendships, unhealthy relationships, and emotionally draining situations because they focus more on who a person could become than who that person consistently proves themselves to be. Deep down, they hope that their loyalty will eventually be appreciated. They hope their patience will inspire change. They hope their love will transform the relationship. Unfortunately, reality does not always reward these hopes. The awakening process begins when the empath starts noticing a pattern. They realize that certain people only appear when they need something. Some individuals only value them during moments of convenience. Others make promises they never intend to keep. The empath begins looking back on past experiences and recognizing how much energy was invested into people who never offered the same level of care in return. What once felt like generosity starts looking more like self-neglect. What once felt like loyalty starts feeling like emotional overextension. This realization can be difficult because empaths naturally dislike giving up on people. They understand pain, they understand mistakes, they understand human flaws, but awakening teaches them an important distinction. Understanding someone does not mean accepting harmful behavior. Compassion does not require unlimited tolerance. Forgiveness does not require continued access. For the first time, the empath learns that it is possible to care about someone while also choosing distance from them. As this awareness grows, the awakened empath becomes far more intentional about relationships. Instead of instantly trusting everyone, they allow trust to develop gradually. Instead of becoming emotionally invested at the first sign of connection, they observe consistency over time. They pay attention to actions rather than words. They notice whether people show up when it matters. They evaluate whether respect, honesty, and effort flow in both directions. Relationships stop being based on potential and start being based on reality. One of the most noticeable changes is that the awakened empath no longer feels responsible for saving everyone. For years, they may have played the role of rescuer, therapist, motivator, and emotional caretaker. They often believed that if someone was struggling, it was their duty to help. While helping others can be meaningful, awakening reveals a truth that many empaths desperately need to hear. Some people do not want to be helped. Some people do not want solutions. Some people simply want someone to absorb the consequences of their choices. The awakened empath recognizes this difference and stops carrying burdens that belong to others. This shift often leads to a smaller social circle, but a healthier one. The empath becomes selective about who receives their time, attention, and emotional energy. They stop chasing people who repeatedly pull away. They stop convincing others to value them. They stop fighting for connections that require endless effort from only one side. Instead, they invest in relationships where respect is mutual and care is reciprocated. What surprises many awakened empaths is how peaceful life becomes when they stop forcing relationships. The constant anxiety about being accepted begins to fade. The pressure to keep everyone happy starts disappearing. They no longer waste energy trying to maintain connections that are built on imbalance. They understand that genuine relationships do not require endless sacrifice to survive. The right people appreciate honesty, respect boundaries, and contribute to the connection instead of simply benefiting from it. As their standards rise, the empath begins attracting different types of people. Healthier individuals naturally respond to authenticity, self-respect, and emotional maturity. The awakened empath is no longer searching for people who need saving. They are looking for people who are capable of walking beside them as equals, people who value loyalty, integrity, growth, and mutual support, people who bring peace rather than chaos, people who add to their life rather than constantly draining it, people whose presence feels consistent, trustworthy, and aligned with the life the empath is now creating for themselves. When most people hear the word leader, they often imagine someone loud, dominant, or commanding. They picture a person who takes control of every situation, speaks with authority, and demands attention wherever they go. Because of this stereotype, many people assume that empaths are not natural leaders. After all, empaths are known for listening more than talking, understanding more than judging, and connecting more than controlling. But this assumption overlooks something incredibly important. The qualities that make an empath deeply compassionate are often the very same qualities that make them exceptionally influential once they awaken to their true potential. Before awakening, many empaths hide from leadership without even realizing it. They doubt themselves, they underestimate their abilities. They assume that stronger personalities should take charge while they remain in the background. They spend so much time supporting others that they rarely recognize their own value. They become advisors instead of decision makers. They become encouragers instead of visionaries. They become the person helping everyone else succeed while quietly ignoring their own potential. Deep down, they may believe they are not qualified to lead because they do not fit the traditional image of what a leader should be. The awakening process changes this perception completely. The empath begins recognizing that leadership is not about control, it is about influence. It is about understanding people, inspiring growth, and creating trust. Suddenly, qualities they once viewed as weaknesses become strengths. Their ability to understand emotions becomes an advantage. Their ability to listen deeply becomes a powerful leadership skill. Their ability to see different perspectives allows them to make wiser decisions. Instead of trying to become someone else, they start realizing that their natural traits already contain the foundation of effective leadership. One of the reasons awakened empaths become powerful leaders is because people genuinely feel seen around them. In today's world, many individuals feel ignored, misunderstood, or dismissed. They are surrounded by people who listen only to respond rather than to understand. The awakened empath offers something different. They pay attention. They notice concerns that others overlook. They make people feel valued. This creates a level of trust that cannot be manufactured through titles, authority, or status. People naturally gravitate toward those who make them feel understood. Another transformation occurs in the empath's confidence. Before awakening, they may hesitate to share their ideas because they fear criticism or rejection. They may hold back their opinions to avoid conflict. But once they develop emotional resilience and self-awareness, they stop seeking constant approval. They begin trusting their judgment. They recognize that leadership often requires making difficult decisions and accepting that not everyone will agree. Instead of allowing fear to silence them, they learn to speak with clarity and conviction. The awakened empath also develops an extraordinary ability to unite people. Because they understand emotions so well, they often recognize conflicts before they escalate. They can sense tension within groups and address issues before they become major problems. They know how to communicate in ways that reduce defensiveness and encourage cooperation. Rather than creating division, they create connection. Rather than ruling through fear, they inspire through understanding. This makes them particularly effective in environments where teamwork, trust, and collaboration are essential. What separates awakened empaths from many traditional leaders is their focus on service rather than ego. They are not driven solely by recognition or power. They are motivated by purpose. They want to contribute something meaningful. They want to create positive change. They want to help others reach their potential. Because of this mindset, their influence often extends far beyond their immediate environment. People remember how they made them feel. People remember the encouragement they provided during difficult moments. People remember the belief they showed when others doubted them. As their awakening deepens, the empath begins embracing responsibility instead of avoiding it. They stop waiting for someone else to lead. They stop assuming someone else knows better. They recognize that their experiences, insights, and emotional intelligence have prepared them for greater influence. The same sensitivity that once made life difficult now becomes a source of wisdom. The same compassion that once left them vulnerable now becomes a source of strength. The same awareness that once overwhelmed them now helps guide others through uncertainty. The awakened empath discovers that true leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room, but about becoming the person whose presence inspires growth, trust, courage, and transformation in everyone fortunate enough to encounter them